All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Better Bus virtual public meeting. My name is Natalie Bouchard. I am a public information officer with CATS. Just so you know, today's meeting will consist of a presentation and then a Q&A. So before we get started, just a few informational items. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the live chat. I'll also be placing contact and project information in the chat throughout the meeting about Better Bus. But for our first presenter, we have Jason Lawrence. So Jason, you can take it away.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm Jason Lawrence. I'm the Chief Planning Officer with Charlotte Area Transit System. And today with us on the presentation, we have Brian Horton, who's our Strategic Planning Manager, the Project Manager for the Better Bus Plan, and our consultant team that is led by Jessica Alvarez from Foursquare Transportation. So we're very excited today to lay out some of the initial recommendations and ideas that we have from the Better Bus Plan. Next slide. But before we get into the details of the Better Bus Initiative, I wanted to share some ongoing initiatives that CATS is working through to improve the quality and reliability of our services, not only for our customers, but also for some of our internal stakeholders like our employees. We are continuously improving the CATS Pass app. We are rolling out new shelters and benches for our customers, increasing security. We have a series of new buses that are coming online within the coming year, training our employees with the newest and best standards of service delivery. We're launching microtransit next year in the northern communities of Charlotte, so Huntersville, Cornelius Davidson, and North Lake Mall area. Very excited to have microtransit come as a new tool of mobility within CATS. And we're also doing a comprehensive overview of our fares to look at the complexity of our fares, but also how do we simplify those fares for our customers to ultimately make it easier for people to use transit. And all of those that I just mentioned are focused on how we work for you, but also how do we improve our own experience and your experience as well. Next slide. So what is Better Bus? We've been working on a number of initiatives over the past couple of years to improve our strategic planning for CATS bus services. And that has landed us in a place to do what we're calling Better Bus. It's coming out of our recommended adopted plans through Envision My Ride, to increase ridership via some network improvements, reducing travel times while maintaining or expanding services, and also looking at ways to improve the frequency and quality of services to low-income riders in disadvantaged neighborhoods or communities. Next slide. And so as we look to update the Envision My Ride plan through the effort called Better Bus, we essentially have two plans today. Two very aspirational plans. We have one called the Envision My Ride System Plan, and then we have the 2030 Corridor Transit System Plan. There's been discussions within the community of how to fund and build out both of these plans, and CATS is working through an effort called the Transit System Plan Update to take our unconstrained vision of bus and our unconstrained vision of rapid transit with rail corridors throughout the community and combining them into a single plan that we can fund in the future if funding were to become available. And more information on that will come to the public later this year and will be a focused effort through the first half of next year. Many of the recommendations that you see here this afternoon will be a part of the effort folded into the system plan update. Next slide. And that opportunity to bring this vision to reality will be an integrated approach to weave bus service as a part of our foundation for the system plan. It'll be an open, inclusive process. It'll be transparent to discuss the trade-off and opportunities for the bus and rail plan, but it must be realistic and it must be implementable and sustainable over the long term. Next slide. And a part of that process will include the schedule that's on the screen in front of you now. As we look to establish goals and establish our base assumptions later this year, we'll be coming out with alternatives and scenarios for bus and rail early next year. And then by next summer, we will have a fiscally constrained bus and rail plan that we will bring to the Metropolitan Transit Commission to be adopted as our new transit system plan. And then throughout next year, we'll be having ongoing public meetings for Better Bus, Red Line and Gold Line, our fare study, and other community engagement as we seek to improve the quality of our services. So with that, I will hand it over to Brian Horton to discuss some of the regional context and then we'll go into Jessica Alvarez to talk about some of the recommendations of the Better Bus Initiative. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So we'd like to give some regional context to the Better Bus Plan. Charlotte and Mecklenburg and the greater region is really a strong growing region. I mean, do you know that by 2045, the region's population will increase by over almost 1.5 million people, increase of over 50%. And by that time, over 4 million people will live in the 12-county region that is the greater Charlotte region that in North Carolina and South Carolina. Huge growth, which continues Charlotte's story of growth in recent history and into the future. So we're trying to plan for that growth. And you'll see some maps here that don't account for that entire 12-county region, but really focus more on our closer in Mecklenburg, Iredell, and Union region that corresponds with our Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization partner. But a lot of these maps are telling, especially as they cover Mecklenburg County, the core of our service area. But we're a very fast-growing region, and you can see these same statistics for the CRTPO 3-county region of how many people now live here already today, over 1.5 million people in that core region, that we have significant growth, over 25%, that has happened recently in the last kind of 10 years. And we have a significant minority population and a growing minority population, and we're aging. A 6% increase in our median age in recent history. And so, of course, we are growing because this is a great place to live and work. And we have a lot of employment, and it's important to keep that growth going, that we serve a lot of our employment. And so also that transit is such a way to access upward economic mobility and opportunity for our residents. So we know when we look at transit, we're factoring in jobs and employment, and we have in our region over 1 million jobs already in that greater region. We expect then also an increase in that median household income, or we have seen that increase in recent history, of course, of our region. And there are many communities, we call environmental justice communities, they're minority, low income, and we're always looking at those communities to make sure that there are no disproportionate impacts, that we include those communities, and we're looking how we can better serve them, especially any community that we feel is historically disadvantaged in terms of transportation access, or today lacks access to a personal vehicle, and transit is even more important to serve those populations. So of course, we serve places, we are looking at major activity centers, key destinations of employment, education, entertainment, institutions, medical, all those things are very important to us, and we're connecting a greater region with our transportation services. And also, it's an ultimate goal of this area as we're growing to grow more transportation that is not reliant on single occupant vehicles, because single occupant vehicles most greatly contribute not just to emissions, but to congestion. And so if we're going to grow, we need to have a sustainable future in which we have solid, attractive choices to travel other means besides single occupant vehicles, and that very much includes transit. So when we look at Better Bus, this is the importance of why we're doing this plan, that we need to modernize and make transit competitive for these travel choices. And we need to make our bus system much easier for people to use, make those trips much faster, improve the overall connectivity, especially for those who have limited mobility options or are disadvantaged in terms of transportation access, and improve that overall access. Move away from a hub and spoke system of everything coming uptown, having more cross connections and more services in our toolbox to serve more of our service area or grow that service area and destinations. I think at this time, I'm going to hand over to Jessica Alvarez.
Thanks, Brian. So to understand and how to affirm some of those mobility needs that we just discussed, what our team has done in the background is a comprehensive market analysis as well as a operational assessment of the existing services. So what we were trying to do is to really understand the mobility need. This consisted of analyses that what we call transit propensity analyses, which utilizes a model to classify different demographics and geographies according to the likelihood of transit services being used. So focusing in on those areas that not only need it, transit service, but where transit service will be successful. We've combined those various demographic groups with employment characteristics, so that we're getting people where they want to go when they need to go. So we looked at how people were moving through some of this static demographic data that looked at the places people live, but also using travel flow data and travel model data to understand how they were moving between different places. And then this analysis, as I mentioned, used ACS, which is a 5-year estimate for demographic information. But it's a very comprehensive data source based off of census data to really give us an in-depth look at what's happening and where that mobility need exists that we need to address. So here's some high-level maps that show you kind of what we looked at, and there's a lot that goes into it, and we've combined it in a lot of different ways, but this analysis provided a framework for connecting need to opportunity. So we looked at jobs and housing, as I mentioned. We wanted to understand service priorities and have a strategic approach to identifying those priorities if new funding is secured. And service focus will be on frequency and quality. We really want to provide a service that people want to ride and will choose over single occupancy vehicles. So all of these analyses resulted in key strategies that we've used, and I'll be kind of showing how these factor into the recommendations that I'm about to present. But some of our key strategies, when we looked at emerging travel trends, we saw that we could redesign the network to meet existing and future travel needs. Like I mentioned, kind of really focusing in on how people need to connect to different areas and when they need to connect to those areas. We looked at the market potential, and what we found was we could implement higher frequency service on priority corridors based on the densities and the usage we were seeing, and that there was a need to improve transfer hub connectivity to making sure that not only the facilities were upgraded and did what they need to do, but also that the services that connected at those transfer hubs were getting people to where they needed to go. And then through all this analysis, we identified fixed route transit gaps in those areas that might not have transit that needed it. And we found that we can enhance transit accessibility and equity by dispersing services where they're needed. And that included increasing weekend and off-peak services, which generally have lower levels of services, but based on our analyses would benefit from some additional service. And then finally, we wrapped it up with a microtransit suitability analysis that looked at not only where there were unproductive fixed routes that could potentially be converted into this better on-demand service, but we also looked where there were supportive land uses that might not currently have transit to identify those areas that microtransit made more sense than trying to implement a new fixed route service. So as I mentioned, this all culminates into this network that I'm about to present to you. I'm going to present it at a very high level. You will have an opportunity, Natalie will explain at the end how you can access the survey and look at this at the individual route level as well to give us your feedback. But just to kind of orient you all, the existing network is shown here in a map. You can see that looking at various frequencies, 15-minute frequency, there's only the blue line in the route 9 on Central Avenue that have that high level of service, illustrated here with the blue and the red lines on the map. 20-minute frequency services are only found on Route 7, the Gold Line, and express routes in I-77 corridor and Route 64. So, you know, it's very minimal in the existing network. Microtransit is currently only offered in North Mecklenburg, and that's actually in February of 2025. So it's coming, but it's not there yet. And then the majority of the other routes have a 30 to 60-minute frequency through the peak and the off-peak periods. So in our new network, in the Better Bus network, we've added additional 15 to 20-minute service or better service throughout the service area to really distribute high levels of service to encourage people to use the service to get where they need to go. And one of the key components of this new network is increasing peak service across the system to 30 minutes or better. So any 60-minute routes have gone away in this new network. And then you can see we expanded the peak hours for express routes. Overall, we understood that you know, there is that need to get people to job and activity centers during those peak hours, and on some of those express routes that reach further out that don't necessarily operate during midday and off-peak periods. We expanded some of their service hours to encompass some of those trips. And then we added microtransit zones and on top of the North Mecklenburg zone, 3 additional areas. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about these 4 key points. So the existing network, the high frequency network, as I mentioned, currently only consists of course, the blue line and the gold lines are within those 15 and 20-minute buckets. But also we only have the Route 9 as a 15-minute or better service, and the Route 7 as a local route that only operates 20 minutes or better, and then some key express routes. But as we expanded out and created an expanded high frequency network to meet that existing and future demand that we have identified through, existing ridership, land use, future travel, what we found was, and where would be the most beneficial and where we should prioritize investment, a 15-minute service to the North Lake Mall. This is one of the variants of the Route 7, which will now be a single route up to the North Lake Mall every 15 minutes. And then we've created a 20-minute route network along these 8 other key corridors to really connect into Uptown, but also some of them do not end at Uptown. There's a couple of key corridors that go through or end at a Blue Line station or another key activity center. Based on how people were moving, we really designed the routes to address those travel flows. And then in the existing network, just to kind of highlight here, the microtransit, the soon-to-be North Mecklenburg zone, you can see here. But what we've done in the Better Bus network, as I mentioned, was prioritize those microtransit zones to advance some key areas where we identified that they could supplement existing service and or replace. So as I mentioned, we have the North Mecklenburg zone here, and it's replacing the 97, 98, 99, and 290. For the time being, they'll supplement them, but it will, they'll work together. And then here we have a new zone in the University Research Park, UNCC, and this will work with the routes 50 and 54. Hidden Valley, we've added a zone as well. We've streamlined Route 211. So in order to continue to provide some of the connections that might have be lost, we've created a microtransit zone where people could get to where they need to go. And then the 51 in Matthews, we're looking at truncating that route. So we've created a zone that will serve a lot of those areas that the current 51 serves, but also an expanded area throughout Matthews to connect people into the higher frequency network that we've created, since Route 27 was also part of that new high frequency network. And then just to kind of show you what we've done with the express routes, right now we have a 20-minute peak frequency on routes in the I-77 corridor and Route 64. But all the rest of the routes, express routes have limited service, a few trips during those peak hours. So we've revised the network to enhance those regional connections throughout. We've added midday service along I-77 to Davidson, Cornelius, and Huntersville, and Idlewild, and Idlewild in the south. You can see there we've replaced that express service with actually a local route that'll be an extended Route 15. We've expanded peak hour service to Harrisburg and Mint Hill, you can see there. And then we've added more service to the Independence Point Park and Ride, and enhance that connection. We saw that the demand there would exist and would benefit from some additional trips. And we've added new express service between the Blue Line and Valentine in the south. So I want to jump into some of the key benefits that we identified with this new network that we're proposing compared to existing. So the Better Bus network increases access to better transit across the network. This graphic shows how various population groups are seeing increases in access on these different levels of service. So 20-minute or better service, which we identify as high frequency service, you can see for the most part, population groups are seeing over 12% growth in that access, and 0 and 1 card households see a significant increase in access, almost 20%. And then that 30-minute service across the board, across all the various population groups, is over 20% increase in access to these levels of service. And our team also did an accessibility analysis to understand where people could get within 30 minutes. So the Better Bus Network will provide better access to more essential destinations. We found that within 30 minutes, over 30% more job opportunities were available to the average person during peak periods. And then almost 20% more grocery stores will be accessible within 30 minutes throughout the day for low income and minority populations. So that's very key. So next, we're going to talk about what's next, and Brian's going to join me again and kind of kick off this section.
Thanks, Jessica. Yes, so let's talk about where we're going next. So we've had a series of public engagement this week, and it'll continue again today and tomorrow, as well as in December. So if you missed by chance some of these pop-up events that we've already had, or open house that we had, it's okay. We still have some events left. Like today, later today, we will be out at both the Eastland Transit Center as well as Independence Point Park and Ride. And that's a typo, the Rosa Parks Community Transit Center. We did that yesterday. So today's just Eastland, Independence Point. And then tomorrow, Friday, we will be out at the Ella B. Scarborough Community Resource Center in East Charlotte. That's kind of Eastway and Tryon. Then December, after Thanksgiving, we'll be out at several shopping venues. They're major bus destinations: Carolina Place Mall, South Park Transit Center, and North Lake Mall. And actually not be the park and ride, will be at the bus shelters that really serve more of the Route 7 and 99 on the outside of the mall. So we have some upcoming opportunities, but you don't have to even go to those or watch this. There's even, well, hopefully you watch this to learn about it, but we also have a survey. And I think Natalie's going to post in the chat a survey link. We have an interactive remix map on there with the proposed recommendations at the end of the survey, or you can continue without filling out the survey, all the questions. You go directly to remix map link, and there's a comment button in the upper right corner that allows you to comment anywhere on the map. And you don't even have to zoom into the map. If you have a more broader comment, just drop a comment anywhere, or go to the area of interest and you can add your comment. And that's how we'll track a lot of our comments about the proposed changes. Because again, this stage we are really showing the draft recommendations. They are just proposed. They are very much draft, and it's upon us now to really get your input, reactions to those, and we'll be doing some more target outreach, especially in areas that have a lot of proposed changes, to make sure there's community awareness in those areas where there are significant changes. And so, yes, as I mentioned, where we are in the process, this is phase 2. We had previously done phase 1, where it's kind of just the launch, kind of general understanding of our needs. Now we're in phase 2. We're really releasing these draft recommendations, trying to get more input. We'll also be involving our bus operators, drivers, general public at large. We really, in those individual community organizations where there's significant changes. But that's going to feed into the next phase, which is phase 3, where we hopefully refine the draft recommendations. But more importantly, as you heard earlier that Jason Lawrence presented, this is the part of the bus plan that feeds into the transit system plan update. And so that's why this is so important, because just as the 2030 system plan has to now go through that process and look for constrained recommendations, this is the equivalent for bus, going from the Vision My Ride plan that was very ambitious and not constrained, as what we should do as our near-term priorities in that new constrained transit system plan update. And that's all happening in the winter, early into next year. So now I think it's time for questions. And Natalie, been monitoring the chat, or there's opportunity still if you're watching us to enter questions in chat.
Hi, thanks so much, Brian and Jessica and Jason. Really appreciate that presentation. Just to recap, there's a lot of information in the live chat, and that was also covered in the presentation, but I have pinned the survey link at the top of the chat for easy access. I've also put the project website and the project email in that chat. So in case any of your questions aren't answered, or if you think of a new one after this virtual public meeting, please send it to that email address and we will get back to you. But for for our first question in the chat, are there any updates for Cotswold McCallway service? I saw that 15 is going to not go there anymore.
Sure, I'll take that. Actually, Route 15 doesn't currently go to McCallway. It does go to Cotswold via Randolph Road down to Sharon Amity. So the proposal, and again, this draft, is to extend the Route 15 out Idlewild Road via Windover Monroe Road. We see a lot of our ridership on the 15 today in the Greer Heights community, and we feel that Cotswold could still be well served with the Route 28. And historically, there was a Route 28 McCallway that went, that was a legacy route. A lot of our older routes used to turn around in neighborhoods. Like, for example, Route 11 used to turn around in the Hidden Valley community. So, McCallway was one of those historic neighborhood turnarounds. The challenge is, as CATS grew, a lot of routes had to keep going beyond that. And so it's very hard to restore a lot of those older neighborhood turnarounds. But I think there's concern that McCallway Road, where it's located, is kind of a super block of Windover, Sharon Amity, Monroe, and Monroe roads, that the walk access maybe can be sometimes far. So we need to really look at what, as folks walk to the nearest bus stop, making sure that those bus stops have safe crossings, that they're really comfortable places to wait, have seating or amenities, improving the frequency on those routes. So when you walk out to those stops, that you're not waiting so long for the service. There's a lot of tools in our toolbox. I think we can still take a look. Maybe there's a way possibly to route something instead of maybe Sharon Amity Road, possibly on McCallway, but really the toolbox generally points to trying to avoid local side streets like that, instead trying to find more the seams of the more major streets that connect more neighborhoods. But we can definitely take a look at that.
Thanks, Brian. That was a very thorough answer. The next question we have is, what areas have the highest bus usage?
Sure. Yeah, today Route 9 is our highest bus route, and it has about 10% of all of our bus ridership. And our bus ridership is over like 60% of our total transit ridership. It's still higher than our rail ridership. So it's in about our top 10 routes are about roughly 40% of the bus ridership, and then our top 20 routes or so, or just under 15, is about 50% of our bus ridership. So we do have some very high ridership routes. And in fact, the routes that you saw that we're trying to prioritize for frequency are many of the top high ridership routes.
Thanks, Brian. This next question, any bus service to Concord Mills on the weekend?
Yes, so the good thing about that quality network recommendation of kind of not just the high frequency routes and the microtransit and the express, those are good buckets too of key recommendations. But I'm most excited about the overall recommendation, making sure wherever we go is really a quality investment that at least has 30-minute predominant service, especially in the peak, but extending those 30-minute windows, and most importantly, making sure the weekend service is a quality service, not having too much of a different service level on Saturdays and Sundays as we do now, but investing in the weekends to have that more consistent quality service every day.
This next question, will customer service be available during the times that the buses, all the times that the buses run, i.e. nights and weekends?
Yes. So now that was recently cut back. We have call center. I forget the hours are not the full hours I know as our current transit service. Natalie might know the answer to the current hours operation, but
I can post it in the chat.
Thank you. But I do know the microtransit service that we're launching, we will have a new local call center that will support that during the full hours of those microtransit operations. So you don't necessarily have to use your smartphone or use a smartphone or app to book your travel, that you will have call center support for that. That's part of the contract of running the new microtransit service.
And I'll say, for those watching live or anyone watching after the fact, I always like to plug our app. It's the CATS Pass app. It's very useful. I use it all the time. You can see your bus or rail in real time. You can buy your passes, and it kind of has a GPS function where you can literally plan your route, and it gives you the best routes to take and modes to take. So love that app. I'll always plug that. The next question, which route in Uptown has the least ridership?
I don't know the exact route, but I know which ones are candidates. It's generally the ones that overall have the lowest ridership. I don't know if the person's asking specifically within just Uptown or the overall route that traverses Uptown, but I know the overall goal of a lot of these improvements is to move away from every single route having to come into Uptown. And we have at least 3 routes I recall that are key to those recommendations, Route 26, Route 34, and Route 10. Now, those are contingent upon, though, making sure those hubs are set up to support a new crosstown service. So, for example, Route 10, which is proposed to look at continuing on East Boulevard over to the hospital area and Midtown, that we would set up a new hub to support that. And what we saw was like travel, a lot of folks are transferring at the East-West station, which makes sense because why would you go into Uptown and backtrack, especially if you're going south on the Blue Line? And to create more of a single seat ride to more medical, groceries, that you don't necessarily have to transfer to go to those essentials. So we were trying to set that up, and Uptown will still have the most trips. CTC, our biggest hub, is still very much important to remain a hub. But we won't, even if we don't have as many routes going there, we'll still, with all the increased frequency, still have a lot of trips going to or by the CTC in the future. And some of the candidates are, ironically, one of the candidates is one of those routes that has low, that we're recommending to go through is Route 26, relatively low ridership, but that's why we're proposing that it could serve more neighborhoods in Northwest Charlotte, as well as go through to Midtown, so that those neighborhoods and residents have a direct seat access to medical and food as well.
Thanks, Brian. No more questions right now in the chat. We do have a number of comments, and I just want to let people know that those comments will be recorded and kept in our database from feedback we got from this series of meetings. But we really appreciate everyone attending. I'll give maybe a couple more minutes to 12:35 for questions. If anyone has any they want to leave in the chat, but until then, I'll just remind you all the survey link is it's on our website. It's pinned in the live chat here. It's on our social media channels. And then if you do have any questions or comments that you want for the project team to address, you can email betterbus@publicinput.com. That's also in the chat. And oh, it looks like we're having, let's see. We have a question. What would it take to have a shelter and a bench for all inbound bus stops?
Sure. So I will say we've had a culture change at CATS that we used to look at existing ridership to prioritize our seating and cover shelters. We no longer do that. We now are more proactive and think about kind of land use context, potential ridership, and prioritize that based more on need. That being said, it takes time. CATS does not own right of way. We operate in others' rights of way, like city streets, town streets, and state maintained roadways and highways. And so it's a partnership, and it's a process often to acquire either an easement or a dedicated right of way, the space that's needed to add a lot of seating and amenities, because those can't just be on the sidewalk, can't block the sidewalk. They also have to be a reasonable and comfortable distance off of a road, especially faster speed roadways. You don't want to sit too close to that. And it's a requirement actually for transportation needs to often locate those a safe distance off the edge of the travelway. And so that takes some time usually to acquire the real estate. That being said, we're very proactive and strategic and almost opportunistic how we're trying to get those more and more through others and partners and land development. As land development happens, especially more major development like multi-family commercial, to improve those things. Because if you can build a sidewalk, you can definitely build a bus stop. And so public projects, private park and private land development work, often improving those bus stops through others, as well as our own capital program.
Thanks, Brian. This question, will the number 4 go away with increased frequency of 23?
So that's the proposal. So because this is a constrained plan, it's a scenario in which there are some trade-offs if we were to invest, under the assumption that we only have existing or reasonable minimal growth in our revenue in the near future to do bus service improvements. And so a key goal is in that overall plaza corridor to create a high frequency corridor, especially where it moves away from the Blue Line, which itself is a high frequency corridor. And so to do that, a trade-off is to consolidate the routes 4 and 23 and locate that more on like Parkwood Plaza instead of, meandering through the Belmont and Optimus Park neighborhoods. That's the proposal, but that comes with trade-offs. But then it creates more walk access either to, obviously, if you're close to the Blue Line, that's the high frequency line that you have closer walking access to. But if you're closer to Parkwood Plaza, that'd be a new attractive option by having that high frequency service away from Blue Line.
Thanks, Brian. Looking to see, monitoring the chat to see if we have any more questions in here. Okay. To remove competition with 39 at Wendover Road, is it possible to have 15 serve Beale Street and Craig Avenue and then go to Monroe Road?
Yes, so today the 39 has high ridership on Wendover Road, and so the thought with the new 15 as proposed was to really provide another option to have direct access to Uptown that 39 doesn't provide from Wendover Road. But again, in that general area, I think as we look at McAlloway Road, we can look at all those nearby streets, neighborhood streets in Greer Heights and adjoining communities to see if we are missing something of an opportunity of possibly going a different way.
Thanks, Brian. There's a lot of activity in the chat, mostly comments, but again, folks, your comments will be recorded as part of this project. So thank you for those. We really appreciate your feedback. And I would encourage everyone to go to the survey link that's pinned at the top of the live chat and leave your comments there as well. Really appreciate your feedback. I'll give everybody about 2 more minutes if we have any more questions.
I encourage everyone attending now or watching later recorded, please also let others know about this and the importance of it. We haven't probably done this much of an extensive effort in looking at our bus route system since the Blue Line extension, where we integrated a lot of the routes, then of course to better connect to the opening of the Blue Line extension. So it really is, it's not a plan that's going to sit on the shelf, and with how it's going to feed into the transit system plan update that will be presented and collaborated with MTC early next year, it really will inform a lot of the near-term priorities, investments, and changes that are going to happen in the near future.
And I will also put the link to the remaining schedule in the chat for folks. We do have one more question. I think this is the last one. Will we one day be able to use credit cards, debit cards to board a bus/train?
Yes, so we're also doing a fare study that will have some public outreach as well upcoming, so stay tuned for that. But really the future is leveraging technology, ease of simplicity, seamlessness of travel, right? Technology is our friend, and that's what can also make transit more attractive to compete. I mean, for one, you don't have to worry about driving. You can be on your smartphone, laptop when you're traveling or just hanging out with friends. But 2, you can use technology to really make informed decisions, right? I mean, Natalie really plugged our app well, and you can pay today already using your app. Now we are cognizant and being very sensitive to the digital divide, but the cool thing is there's more in the future, the opportunity maybe to have issued fare cards that people can use for those that don't have smartphones or don't, that we can ultimately go cashless. That is the long-term plan, and that is what the fare study is looking at, and kind of reducing the complexity of our fares, right? Having no what's the transfer or express fare versus local fare, just an easier to use system in the very near future.
Well, thanks everyone. I don't see any more questions in the chat right now, but just in case your question wasn't answered or you think of something later, please email betterbus@publicinput.com. Excuse me. And we appreciate everyone coming out to watch this live. If you're watching it after the fact, we appreciate you as well. And just know that survey link is pinned at the top of the chat. But I think that's it for today. Thank you so